Hey, good evening and welcome. This is the meeting of the school committee. It is February 10th, 2025. Call the meeting to order 5:26. This meeting is being both audio and video recorded. I would like to ask that everyone please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. Samantha, please.
Samantha Velasquez.
Pamela Blair, Assistant Superintendent of Business.
Sarah Trulio.
Gordon Smith, Superintendent of Schools.
Henry Thompson.
Nella Rochella.
William Strother.
Amy Wenta. Heather Brown, Director of Curriculum.
Emmanuel Garcia, Student Representative.
Okay, thank you all. We have one set of minutes for approval. I take a motion, please.
I move to approve the January 27, 2025 regular session meeting minutes.
Motion made by Antonella. Second by William. Discussion. Favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. That carries 5-0. For those. Committee and subcommittee communications. Emmanuel, you want to start us out tonight?
Sure. Once again, ELHS is participating in Read Across America Day on March 7th. Some of the high school students are going to go to Meadowbrook to go read to the kids.
Great.
Some other things are Spartanums. We're rehearsing for that. That's happening March 7th and 8th. And girls basketball just had a huge one last weekend.
Great. What book are you reading?
I have no idea.
And what's your act for Spartan?
One of the directors.
Oh, cool. Congratulations. Very cool.
Did they pick a theme yet?
It's kind of like Hollywood. Like they have Spartanum written like on a Hollywood sign.
Oh, that's cool. I know.
Nice. Great. Thank you. Amy.
The sheriff said it.
Okay. William.
Oh, there's a leaf.
Yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
I went to my first leaf event.
You leave.
E-leaf.
Ely. Leads the next town over.
Yes.
E-leaf event.
Very different.
It was different. It was interesting. Beautiful place. Absolutely beautiful. Everybody seemed really fun. Everybody seemed to know each other except for me. I know you guys, so that's what really counted.
We had fun.
But no, it was a really good event. Really well done. So I
Yeah.
applaud it.
Good fundraiser too.
Absolutely.
It's a great fundraiser. And
People got some good trips out of it.
yes, they did. Chair included. Out to the Grand Canyon, the big hole in the ground. Thank you, William. Antonella, did you have anything else?
Nope, I'm good.
Let's say.
Okay. Just the two announcements. We're going to meet with town council the 25th, and then the topping off ceremony is the 26th of March, and you'll all be
26th of
February. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. You all should have received the invitation if you haven't.
They've gone out. yet.
What? I don't
No?
think I
I
got.
think they've gone out.
Yeah.
I got
Is
one.
that a Tuesday?
Yeah.
And to reach out to you,
Okay.
Gordon, about,
I don't know. There's like.
and
Looking forward to it, don't you?
We'll check on it.
Okay.
It's coming on the 26th at noon. Amy, just so you know, but we'll make sure everybody gets that.
Okay.
We're gonna do lunch,
26th at noon?
12 o'clock, topping off. It's when the steel is done.
Okay.
Last steel beam, yeah.
The last steel beam, they'll put a tree at the very top of it. So they'll hang an evergreen tree and
And
then
that's on the 26th.
all the
a big
the
deal.
working crew comes in and we're hopefully get some good lunch for everybody.
And that's on the,
26th of February, 12 o'clock.
oh, that's
Cafeteria?
So it's my birthday.
Mhm.
Nice.
We're planning on it.
Hey,
So
We'll sing happy birthday to William. That's when we're there. Right? Is that what you said? Your birthday?
Yes.
Oh, sweet.
nice.
Okay. With that, opportunity for visitors to address the committee, seeing none. We have Mr. Page here right now, so I would entertain a motion to move 5.1.2 ELHS draft competency determination to the next order of business.
second.
William moves it.
Second.
Antonella seconds.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. Okay.
In your package, you have a memo from Mr. Page outlining competency determination and
What's the 25th?
we have some additional information that Studio had asked for, so wanted to provide all of you with that. Thanks.
Hey, do you have this, right?
So,
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. Yep. So, on February 4th, I sent, the school committee memo, outlining, our local high school, recommendation, for the competency determination. Back in November, I think as everybody knows, but I'll just state it anyway. Uh, there was a vote that passed, to eliminate MCAS as the competency determination. And with that vote, it also, required districts to make the decision locally, what the new competency determination would be, but it could not be anything connected to the passing of an MCAS test. The state's recommendation since has been, to recommend coursework, connected to the standards that are, currently covered by the MCAS test. So what we are looking to recommend this evening is, the coursework connected to, the classes that students would take to prepare for, the MCAS math, English, and, science tests. What I'm going to be outlining tonight is, similar to some of the districts around us. Minnechaug just passed, their, local competency determination recommendation, which was, the exact same one that we're discussing. Agawam is voting to, pass the same one, and, Ludlow is also making the same recommendation. So we're in line with what other districts are doing. Our thinking is the same. Long and short, what I'm looking to propose tonight is, for a student to meet the competency determination for English, those students successfully complete coursework, basically pass, English in grades 9 and 10. On the math side, we made the recommendation that students, successfully pass Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. And because science does allow the students to pass, two separate tests, we made the recommendation that students would pass either biology or physics, even though right now all students do take, biology as freshmen. So the vast majority, I expect, would have, biology as the class that meets their competency determination. There's just a little note on there. We do have some students who take algebra in, eighth grade. At the end of eighth grade, when they take that course, they do take a final exam, which is based on, the Algebra 1 standards. So successful passing of that exam, we would acknowledge those eighth graders as meeting that competency determination for Algebra 1. Also during grade 10, students do have the ability to take AP Seminar, as the equivalent, as an equivalent for their English 10. So we would also acknowledge that as, meeting that determination as well. And again, the rationale behind all of this is each of these courses that we're outlining, they are standard driven courses, and, they are the standards that prepare the students to successfully pass, the MCAS in those three content areas.
And this is different than graduation requirements.
Yeah, so we have our graduation requirements, which are set, which we're not looking to alter or change. The state is just requiring now, because MCAS can no longer be used as a competency determination, that we identify a new competency determination, which basically just means the students, demonstrate that competency in those content areas. These recommendations that we're making tonight are in line with what the state is recommending we do, and also in line with what is covered on the MCAS test.
Are they mostly graduation requirements anyway, though? Don't they overlap?
They do.
They do overlap.
They do. Yeah. So there's some common sense in terms of how we're approaching this.
And a passing grade is defined as?
D- or above, a kid who has a 60 overall average in that course. Yeah.
Is that in line with what area other
Yeah.
towns are a D minus?
Yeah. Everybody's going with successful completion and passing of that course. They're not setting a higher threshold just for the competency determination.
This is also, just to note it, this is in line with a similar practice that the state implemented during the pandemic. During the pandemic, when the MCAS test was, we'll just say, postponed for about a year and a half there, they allowed districts to utilize one course in English, one course in math, one course in science as meeting the competency determination. So the passing of courses is a practice that they did briefly engage in when we weren't taking the MCAS test.
Do we expect the state to come forward with another determination of competency tool?
I would not be surprised at some point if there's a revisiting of something, but at this point,
This is the guy.
this is the guidance that they're putting forward because they are saying that based on that new law that the decision is made locally and it cannot be the MCAS test.
Well, it can be the MCAS test as a measure of graduation requirement.
As a graduation requirement, yes, but not as a competency determination.
Locally set a score,
Yes,
if we so chose, to say a child must have a score of blank on ELA math science as a function of their graduation. That is what control,
Do we have that now?
no,
because we had the state test.
Right.
Mhm.
But the same test, the MCAS, we could.
So we can put
incorporate-
that into the graduation requirements. We cannot put that
Can't
in.
put it in competency determination. You'd have to put it in graduation requirements.
But that is part of what the state did say,
They
that you could.
recommend that?
that you could.
Yeah, you can even have passing the MCAS.
Why
They're
would-
very careful on their wording and they're not recommending that districts work around that law. They're just saying that if you chose to do that, you could.
Are school districts allowed to use a student score on high school MCAS tests as part of their local graduation requirement, apart from the competency determination? Yes. Establishment of graduation requirements is at the sole discretion of school districts.
So would you propose that as what
Well-
we might want to do?
Graduation and competency are two different things.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
But the
But-
MCAS data will still be used in our district's accountability report.
Yes.
So maybe we should make it part of the graduation requirement.
Because
Determining the threshold, if you're now holding back graduation, what is the threshold? That would be
Yeah.
challenging.
I'd be more inclined to look at the competency determination and say, why does it need to be a D minus? If we're really I mean, to me, a high stakes test isn't is measuring student learning in a certain type of way. But maybe looking at how they're actually doing in their courses is a different way to approach it and say, maybe a C minus is a better way to go. I don't know. I'm just,
Course failure that you just gave us, the course failure rates for current 10th graders who from last year. So the
Yeah.
current 11th graders.
Yep.
This is only indicative of somebody who scored a 59 or lower.
Yes. Over the course of the year. Yeah, it's not by term, that's their final average. Yes.
It is not inclusive of kids who see anywhere in the Ds.
No.
One example, eligibility for activities in sports is still C average,
2.0.
2.0. So it is something that at least is done for eligibility. Depending.
are you saying that you'd be hard pressed? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but does D minus show that they've attained competency in that subject?
are you asking?
Yeah.
I would say that a D minus shows that they have not.
That's what I'm clarifying.
Competency, right?
But a C minus would,
I mean,
it has to be somewhere.
it just depends on what the group believes
Yeah.
the appropriate threshold would be. Like, to me, a D minus doesn't show that you've met any type of competency in a course. And of course, that's debatable. I mean, there's so many different, it's subjective in certain ways. And there's also special education students to think about. I mean, there's so many moving parts. So I was just throwing it out there that
Well, I mean,
Raise the bar a little bit.
I guess I would agree to disagree. I think a D minus is still passing. I mean, what do we call a doctor with a D minus?
yeah, sure. I get
Doctor.
it. Yeah.
At the end of the day, they're still a
Sure.
doctor. They might not be the best one, but they still are.
You're not
Not a
wrong.
doctor.
You're not wrong.
the D minus I'm giving is not necessarily the same D minus you're giving.
Agreed.
So how is that consistent?
I don't think it can ever be.
with grades.
If because we're not always going to be doing it the same way, so we can never get there.
When it's
So,
It's not
Subjective.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
What-
even with all different assignments, I mean, do all the teachers have the same assignments? And the same finals and the same essays? Or any of the things that they count as summative assessments?
We do push in our commonly taught classes for students to have common experiences. Is it perfect every single homework? I can't say yes to that. Is it?
I mean, the summatives, I mean, homework assignments, no.
We've been gradually transitioning to that, and I think we're in a really good spot for that, especially in the courses that you see outlined. All of these courses have, we'll just say, standardized curriculums at this point. And those kids do get those common experiences where the assessments are the same.
In fact, the English department met with the woman who is facilitating the PD in terms of helping them implement the Odell High School literacy. And they looked at student work together from a common assessment. So
Frank, do you have initial thoughts of the C minus versus D minus or?
I'd be hesitant where we'd be setting two separate sets of standards. Our requirements over here would say that they would meet it, and then you'd be saying over here they do not. I think that could be some confusion there. For me, I think this is in line with what other districts are doing, what the state is recommending. And if our students are passing courses that are based on the standards that are going to be covered on the MCAS, I would recommend this as is. I'd be concerned raising that, because I will say to address what Ms. Trulia was talking about before, we have students who pass courses who fail the MCAS because they're just not good test takers. And we also have students who pass the MCAS and fail courses because they don't do the work, so some of those failure rates, we have students in that group who are competent and they have demonstrated that competency through their test, but they still have failed that course, so
yeah.
Well, maybe
You look at-
emphasis on these major courses then.
yeah,
It might not be four, now there's higher stakes.
And if you look at the competency determination at the state level, the number of students who failed or so many times were unable to attain their diploma, there's like 700 kids. So if you drill that down at the district level, we're not talking about large percentages here. I think there is
41%, 31% across the subjects did not meet expectations in 10th grade last year.
Say that again.
30% of students did not meet expectations in ELA last year. 41 did not meet expectations in math, and 31% did not meet expectations in science.
We're not talking about kids who did, but they still met their competency determination. I'm talking about students who did not meet their competency determination, which are two separate pieces.
Comparatively, we did have a number of students who did not meet expectations on MCAS.
But they still met their competency determination, which are two separate things.
When you say not meet, you're including partially meeting, right?
Yes.
Because that's not meeting.
But the state is still looking at it as meeting competency determination.
Yes.
And I'm just saying,
Yeah, no, I'm not arguing. We'd like to move everybody up to meeting expectations. But the state does allow the competency determination to be met, partially meeting.
but I think the reason I asked for the GPA, that's concerning to me that we have a 10th grade GPA that's sitting at a B+ average, which when you look at a scaled score context, that's teetering around meeting expectations, exceeding expectations. So how are we going to manage that when we think about,
In that GPA, though, you also have the weighted.
It's a weighted GPA on a 4 or 5 scale.
but we're also saying kids are passing with a 60.
Right.
There's a minimum GPA requirement for extracurricular participation. Is there a minimum GPA requirement for graduation? Remind me.
No. It's meeting the graduation requirements for credits based on passing coursework.
And passing for graduation is the same passing as competency.
That's what we're recommending now.
I was hoping to solve your GPA situation. I mean, would that help to put a minimum GPA requirement in the graduation requirement, which would kind of solve what Amy is saying? Say they happen to get a D minus in one, well, they'd have to do extraordinary well in a different one too.
I think that's a separate conversation.
Okay.
Tonight is just about, making
No, understood.
for a local competency determination based on what the state's asking us to do this year. Because this, I will just say there's a timeliness here because this does apply to the class of 25.
And besides all the other things we're talking about, this is pretty much what this is what the state's basically saying.
State's recommending that these are the courses that you put forth.
I mean, they pretty much lay it out.
Where are you finding that? Because any language I've seen, the state is saying, we're not going to give you a list.
So the
recommendation was based on the standards that the MCAS is assessed on.
Right, but I'm saying question 8 on the frequently asked questions says, will DESE be providing a list of courses that meet the new language of the law? No.
No, not the courses, but
But that's what I'm saying is the guidance can't be the courses. We can't claim the guidance is the courses from the state. The state is specifically.
it's coursework. So I went the webinar and there's the frequently asked questions like you're talking about, but they said something, for example, if a student completed 3 years of science, they meet the grad requirements, if that's your grad, but if they took physical science, chemistry, and environmental science, they would not meet the CD because the coursework needs to be connected to the standards measured by MCAS assessments offered in 2023. So that's where that comes from, is the courses have to be connected to what's assessed in the MCAS. So they're even saying if a child takes 4 years of math, but they don't get past algebra 1, they wouldn't meet the competency determination, as Mr. Page is saying, because they need to have the algebra 2.
To be connected to the standards assessed on the MCAS.
And we're really just talking about, right now, we're just talking about this class right now. This class of 2025.
So this would be going forward. This is all classes going forward.
Right, but
Until the state changes what.
specifically, we're focusing right now on this class. We're talking about the future classes, but we're talking about the graduation of this group of.
Immediate.
The immediate. And I don't think I don't think we play around with games with what MCAS did and so on and so forth. If the teacher says they passed, then they graduate.
Mhm.
I don't think we sit here and play, if it's a GPA or if it's an MCAS and so on and so forth. If they did the work, the teacher said they passed, let these kids pass and let these kids graduate. Let's not play with their graduation. It's just not fair.
I don't think it's playing with their graduation.
We are. If we're sitting trying to figure out other mechanisms to figure out if they're going to graduate or not, we are playing with
What
it.
different mechanisms are being brought forth?
I'm saying, I'm looking at most of the room. I know I graduated, I passed, I graduated. There was, the teacher said I passed, we move forward. I think I think if this is what you're assessing based off the teacher's assessment of the kids that are working with the kids, they graduate.
If I can clarify one thing for the class of 25. So the students who took the MCAS already and already achieved their competency determination, those are already in place.
Okay, so they're good.
So the kids who took that as sophomores.
Okay.
I can tell you there's one outstanding senior who needs to take the science. She was unable to take the science this February because the new law was already in place. So her coursework is going to dictate whether or not she graduates right now. So I do have one student who's outstanding, but the other ones, if they had passed that MCAS during their sophomore year, they have already met their CD. That's not being pulled back from them.
Got it.
But this current class of sophomores, we're going to take it right now. It's going to dictate it because they're no longer allowed to use the MCAS.
Right.
Basically, the state kind of took care of folks who weren't passing the MCAS and controlled.
Make sure that they were.
Right, and now it's on local. So we have to have that system and be transparent with families before these kiddos graduate.
Is there another measure on the table? I don't know what else we would use.
I just think there needs to be greater continuity, like to Antonella's point earlier. An A in my class might mean a C in Gordon's class. Like if there is not consensus around grading, if there's not consensus around what is contributing to the end of the year grade, if there's not consensus around those items or how much I weight something versus how much Amy weights something, or I assess these standards more often because I believe they're more critical to the grade level, then we're running the risk of not creating what's equitable system.
What's the grading policy?
in terms of,
Like, how much?
Like how much does,
How much is a summative assessment?
Different for each teacher, right? I mean,
So
So in our
teachers,
commonly taught classes, we do expect teachers to use the same grading weights and categories for all of their classes. So for instance, in like math, I don't know the percentages off the top of my head, but tests and quizzes are X amount, X number per term. Homework is X amount. Classwork might be X amount. I don't know the categories off the top of my head, but we do expect that in commonly taught classes, they use the same categories with the same percentages.
have they developed, Mr. Page, in those classes, common assessments?
That's what's happening with the Reveal Math. They have common assessments that they all can come from.
Starting to,
And then the Odell, the same thing. So
I guess my question would be have or are implementing?
we're implementing and we still need to probably calibrate.
Like having access to something and actually utilizing it are dramatically different.
And I think your point too is like the calibration of it, because we might give the same common assessment, but I might not grade it the same way. So that's an important piece of it as well.
and you also might not weight it the same way. I know you're saying that you guys try to have the same weights, but is anyone monitoring these? Is there a policy in place? Like, this is what the expectation is? Or maybe we also set that expectation with this.
Mhm.
Like, this is what our grading policy is. For summatives, it's this percentage. For formatives, it's this percentage. And everyone's following this.
So you're talking about beyond the commonly taught classes, but
I think he's talking about for the competency determination courses,
just for those courses.
these courses.
I think as a starting point, like if we're going to stand behind stating that these students have met the requirements and we're not looking to adjust above, moving the percentage to above a 60, then I think there has to be greater continuity around what those pieces mean. Even so much as to say that, yes, I get that a student could leave Birchland passing Algebra 1. Passing Algebra 1 based on Birchland standards now we're bringing in a whole nother level.
That's a common assessment.
No.
Right, but I'm saying like how that teacher creates their classroom dynamic and what has been building towards that.
We don't give eighth graders algebra credit unless they pass our final exam. So they can pass the course all year, but if they don't pass our final exam in June, then they retake the course as high schoolers.
So some of this work has already been done, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Page, this is really, so this would you argue is a good baseline right now, based on the districts that have already implemented it?
It sounds like there's a separate conversation maybe going on around potentially adjusting our graduation requirements at some point. For a competency determination, meeting with the state's asking for the state's graduation requirement. This is the one that I think makes the most.
So with this being the most basic and the baseline, I would think in listening to the discussion, it sounds like we could start here and then adjust moving forward. But not try to figure this all out today after the work that you've already done to kind of give us a baseline to move forward from.
I think for some of the other conversations we're having, I'm open to those conversations, but if we're just talking specifically to the competency determination tonight, this would be my recommendation.
I agree. It seems like a conversation that's going to be ongoing. I think we've already started to have these conversations over the past several years. And I think it's really a sensitive subject as well, because teaching is an art. There is some subjectivity to it, but you also want to balance it with a certain type of, making sure that everyone's being held to the same standards. And I know that this conversation has come up around this table. So I agree. Maybe it's a good idea to just look at this, what's right in front of us. But I definitely agree that there's some more conversations that maybe we'll have around this in the future.
Okay.
I don't necessarily agree. I think that if we're thinking about saying to the public as a board, who's responsible now for approving this, that competency is determined by anything above a 59. I don't see that, and not having that, the capacity to know what went into creating the score of a 60 for one student versus a score of a 60 for another. I think that's challenging. I don't know that.
Do you think that's able to be uniformed by?
I think you
nature,
can
yeah.
look at English 9 and say, these are the 6 standards that we are going to all commit to teaching. These are the 3 assessments that we're going to ensure have those 6 standards on them. These are the 3 essays that we're going to use towards in common. We're going to score them together. I think there are practices and roles that each individual can play within each of these grades to create greater levels of continuity in terms of saying an A in my class is the same as an A in Williams. An F in my class is the same as an F in Amy's. Because without that, and I'm not saying this would happen, but without that, how do we then determine that kids who maybe have not historically done well don't end up in the class where an A is just, oh, you turned your homework in. And I'm not saying that happens, but we create a situation for ourselves to not be able to put to rest the idea that it could.
And I agree. I absolutely agree. I just don't know if we
Can I
can
ask one
figure that out right now.
question, just because we have 3 out of our 5 members who work in Springfield? Have you guys decided what your
Not yet.
policy determination is going to be yet? Have you had this discussion?
I know we haven't.
Well, I know what the message has been, that the MCAS is still going to be looked at pretty heavily in our district.
Which it still will be here. You can't have it as part of your competency.
Is that the message that has gone out to families?
We haven't given any message.
No.
Why we're doing,
Other
yeah.
than when they've asked
So-
questions about signing up for retests.
You think it'll make it a graduation requirement in Springfield?
I don't know.
Because if there's no incentive, it's not going to work.
So there's incentives to passing passing the MCAS, but doing well on the MCAS. I don't know how well it's going to be received by our students, but there's scholarships that are available. The Seal by Literacy has, set standards for how well kids have to do when it comes to scoring well on the MCAS. So there's stuff that can be appealing. We'll just say
It's half the population, probably.
to a percentage of the population, but there are going to be challenges for motivating kids who don't care about some of that stuff.
I do have to say, like, a lot of the conversation that you're having, it seems like are potential changes to the graduation requirement that would then influence this. But do we need to
So you have
determine,
students-
can we have something in place for now and then match it up with whatever we change with the graduation
We have
requirement?
students who meet our graduation requirements and don't meet the state's competency determination. And then we have kids who meet this competency determination, but they still fail to
This is
graduate.
why we need a policy.
So like, they are kind of separate things, because those graduation requirements are local and they've been in place for a very long time. This is obviously a change with the state. We're moving from, a baseline standardized score, which I think is kind of what Ms. Trulia was getting at, versus now coursework that doesn't have that standardized level to it that the state does with the MCAS. I get it. But a vote passed in November, and it put us in this situation where all districts are making these decisions now locally and
Mhm.
trying to figure out what makes the most sense.
Did you explore the option of just the summative evaluation being the determining factor, or that's not, because then you could uniform that?
So the state recommended looking at coursework connected to the standards. So
Okay.
I followed state guidance with this recommendation. We're not required to go that way, but that's their recommendation, and that's the recommendation I'm putting forward.
Would we also be able to put a grading policy with this? Like, so that everything counts the same?
So we have that. Are you talking about just for these courses?
We can start with just these courses. I mean, or we can do all courses, but
So We have a lot of that stuff in place for our commonly taught classes. I don't have all those courses memorized off the top of my head in terms of what the percentages are, but I can tell you,
So then though,
we're teaching grade 9
they're
ELA.
not the same then.
Hmm?
They're not the same then if you're saying that different courses, they count for different things.
So
Are you saying that
AP literature is not grading the same way that
they have
English at 9 is grading.
grading for homework, for classwork, for quizzes and tests? That's what I heard you say.
Yeah, so if you're looking at ELA 9.
Yeah.
Standard and honors, two commonly taught courses, they're going to be using the same grading, weighting for their categories in the same categories. Obviously, that might not be the same as the AP literature teacher who submits his curriculum to the College Board. You know, so like, that's where I'm talking about. There might be differentiation within the department, but for the commonly taught classes, you're going to see the same percentages and the same weighting.
Do you feel the Common Core classes are as similar as we can get now, at least?
I would say in math we're there. I think part of the reason why we're doing the curriculum revision in English right now is we're getting there.
It's objective.
Yeah, it's a subjective content area, obviously, but we've really pushed the last few years to work towards that, and I think we're very close to being there for English. I can tell you on the science side, especially for biology, we're there.
Okay.
I can tell you in the math department, the biology department, they use the same assessments. In bio, it's the same labs, it's the same exams.
Well, physics, you only have one teacher.
Physics, I have one teacher.
So we'll continue that as a focus,
Always will.
conformity.
That's been a push for me for 5 years.
Yeah.
Common experience for kids in commonly taught classes.
Any other questions or comments before we put this to a vote? Recommended changes?
I just don't think a list of courses is enough. I think there should be something that's speaking to what within those courses is uniform.
Like certain evaluations?
Even if it was just a common final exam, I think I would.
They don't give common final exams, Frank, is that fair? Say in like courses? Necessarily. Math is.
Math does.
Biology?
Biology.
Biology is typically a lab. It's not an exam, it's a lab.
And
And English had some subjectivity, as you said, anyway, inherently, so.
Yeah, I'll just say on the English side, it's more of a performance assessments than that traditional final exam. So performance would be writing.
Since it's new curriculum, they're going to need more time to calibrate those, but yeah. The infrastructure's in place.
Antonella,
I think there needs to be more on it too.
like what?
I mean, common assessments, what everything's worth, like the grading policy for for the summatives, how many summatives they're doing.
Can we, perhaps, just a suggestion, approve this for the 1 year now and going forward, look for some more detail because I imagine it's partially timely.
And then we could also.
Have this going?
People's, because everybody's in the same boat of having to rush to do something.
Unless you have a suggestion to add now that we could come to some consensus, I would say. Perhaps we go with what we have.
When does this need to be decided by?
For at least one individual.
I have a student who needs the science for this.
So this would go into place for
Immediately.
for your seniors?
This school year.
Yes. Class.
Anyone who hasn't passed the competency determination before the November.
The state really recommended getting something in writing and passed by a board sooner than later so that we do have that in place for.
Could we look at it, Frank, in the upcoming year and perhaps some of the discussion we've taken at today?
I'm open to these conversations and I can tell you departments have even brought up the concept of potentially using some type of competency exam at the end of these courses to demonstrate that. I think I would just need more time before making that expectation here today, because obviously this only got passed 2 months ago, 3 months ago at this point. So, making these types of adjustments on the fly, I would not recommend. I think it takes time, but I think if I talked to math, science, English about using some type of competency final exam, I haven't heard anybody say this yet, but one of the conversations that I had with the science and math department was around, if a student fails a course, they go to summer school, be used to demonstrate competency because it's only a 4-week course versus a full year course. So that's where the conversation around potential competency exams for summer school came in, just to make sure that those kids meet those standards and do demonstrate that competency or proficiency in that content area. So if you guys were wanting to push for something like that, I'm sure we could have that conversation as well. And I think we have a staff who's also already open to that idea, and they actually approached me with it. So
Logistically, we approve this for the 1 year tonight, give you some time to work on it further for next year. That would work functionally, logistically for you now. Okay.
And we're able to change it.
I say we do 1 year.
Yes.
For this year.
Mhm.
Yeah. But I think
The
there's
urgency
value.
is more for the seniors this year.
Right.
There's also
I
value
know.
though, in that the students are able to check their course and everybody knows what they need to do to fulfill their requirements.
And I think this can actually be a really positive thing. I mean, I'm completely against high stakes standardized testing, so I don't hate this shift at all. But I think it could be really positive. I think it could help to a lot of collaboration between, I think that it's important for us to kind of get the point of I really want to have your teachers feel supported. This isn't like a punitive thing. This is, I think, absolutely, let's make whatever we need to do tonight to make this move forward, but then using it as a real opportunity to address some ways that we can improve what's going on. I think that's a positive thing.
Yeah. And we'll trade that to the staff. Of course, we're all trying to work collaboratively and get those students. And I
Right.
think that's what your point is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Any other questions, comments? We'll put this to a vote. I entertain a motion to approve the local competency determination expectation as presented.
This would only count for this year,
Specify that in the motion. Yeah.
and this next coming year, we should have a revised, before the next year starts, correct? Is
So-
that what we're,
if I can just get some clarity. So the expectation is for this year that these are the competencies, this would be the competency determination for class of 2025 for East Elementary High School.
yes,
Going in, looking at the class of 2026, you're asking me to look at a potential competency exam at the end of each of these courses. So the same set of courses, some type of competency exam at the end of those.
However, the challenge there would be many of those students have already taken English 9
They have.
and English 10. They've also taken
Work
algebra
with
and geometry.
staff and come back with, you've heard what the concerns are here. So leave it to you. And, 4 or 5 months from now, if we could start talking about it so that we can give as much people as much notice as possible. Does that work?
And it doesn't have to be an exam. I think it's the need to ensure that there is continuity across room 303, room 306, room 309.
Mhm.
We can't say,
That's definitely the direction we're moving.
And I'm not disagreeing with that. What I do want people to understand, and I think Mr. Page is worrying about, is that your 11th graders have already gone through a number of these courses. So you're passing a competency
Right.
determination.
And that's fine. As
Eighth graders, if we're going to be candid here, you'd be looking at your current 8th graders to meet all of these.
so the policy is going to have to match that. So if they only meet these requirements because they've already met them, fine. But the new ones that haven't taken the class, this is how we're going to move forward. So it'll take some time to move into it, but
But I don't know for the motion, you want to limit it to just the graduating class of 2025, because then you're really limiting the class of 2026 because they don't know what to
expect.
they've already taken these courses.
It's fine, but included in next year's competency expectations will outline that, I believe. Those that have already taken the class.
You're basically going to have a scaling up.
Yes,
They should be grandfathered in,
Yes.
essentially.
As long as.
we have that understanding
Yeah, so
because you can't go back. I mean, there's no going back.
no,
Right, that's
the
all
kids already
I'm saying.
took the classes.
Exactly.
listening to what Mr. Smith is saying, I think the class of 25 and 26 would be pretty much exempt because your current juniors are the ones who are taking algebra 2.
Right, so they're mostly through the list.
Yeah.
So maybe we want to make it valid.
I can still come back to you obviously for next year and be a partial that sophomore class. partial for that freshman class to be full implementation for the kids who are in eighth grade.
Okay, so this would be competency determination for the class of 25 and class of 26.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for. Okay. Anything else? Not, I would entertain a motion. Please. Go ahead, Amy, you got it.
Motion
Yeah.
to approve the ELHS draft competency determination for the 2025 and 2026
Graduating classes.
graduating classes of 2025 and 2020.
Works.
Second.
Motion made by Amy, second by William. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments tonight. Thanks for the
You
info.
guys get out by 7, boys basketball senior night.
Oh, sweet.
Oh.
Wow, cool. We're out by 7. No worries on that. I hope. Okay, we are going to go back to 1.1 and that, or 5.1.1, 24-25 ELPS winter status report.
Okay, at your places, we updated the slide deck, which will be on the screens with additional information. Want to walk you through where we are since we presented our SMART goals back in September and October. And then this sets up the schools for giving you a more specific look as to where they are in the next school committee meeting. Everybody find the slide? Okay. Just updating you on our demographics. We have, as you know, we have continued to see an increase in, on the right side, low income students with disabilities, and therefore, since both of those categories are incorporated in what's defining high needs, we're seeing increases in high needs. You're seeing a much more diverse student population. We're seeing, first started as superintendent, we were probably well in the 80s in terms of percentage white students, and now we're at 71.3, and you see how we break down with other ethnicities. So we do have a diverse population in a variety of ways. We've talked a number of years about supporting the whole child, but what we try to do is continue to, in our SMART goals, focus in on how we're doing that. And certainly one of the big ways that we focused the last 2 years is around how we partner with families to help them with challenges that have been keeping their students from consistently coming to school, because coming out of the pandemic, that has become a challenge throughout the Commonwealth and also throughout the nation.
I interrupt you.
Yeah.
For a second. Manny, we've held you for an hour and a half. If you have homework or anything and you want
I'm okay.
to do yourself anytime, just feel free. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
So this gives you an idea of where we were last year, where our targets are for attendance. Our current attendance rate is similar, a little bit higher at in some places, but similar to where we were last year in terms of a daily attendance rate. And you see where our targets are for chronic absenteeism over on the right side where it says 25%, 2025 target percentage, 11.4, 7.4, and 11.8. We're right up against that. So one of the things that we're doing as we work with families, our percentage in terms of chronic absenteeism is right now looked at in terms of the percentage or the days attended with days in membership, meaning that we're just around 102 days of school. So how many days they've attended in those 102. if we can get them to come more consistently as that days in membership grows, the hope will be that our chronic absenteeism percentage will go down a little bit and we'll get closer to the targets or underneath that target percentage. So we're seeing similar results to what we had last year, where we did a really incredible job in many cases dividing it in half of to where the chronic absenteeism. But right now we're right up against it.
And
Learning, go ahead.
so with the increased use of high quality instruction materials, really trying to use professional development, coaches, leaders, to support and the instructional shifts that we need to do. We have these metrics, and today, so you'll see there's the K-2 has shifted to DIBELS and the high school is using IXL. So today you will see the data from 3 to 8 iReady. Compare those to what we have currently. So before we get into that, I just wanted to show, this is the grid that iReady provides. And you can see that for reading, all of the schools that use iReady are in the high performance, high growth category. And the high performance is nationally normed. So while there's always room for improvement, this is definitely something to celebrate. And then I broke down the iReady reading growth by baseline placement. So this is a kid at the beginning of the year scored 3 or more grade levels below, or if they scored mid or above grade level. That next column is the number of kids who met their typical growth goal. And that typical growth goal is based on how they scored. They kind of are put into cohorts. And then the next one is the percentage of kids who met stretch growth. And, you know, we really want to see that stretch growth continue to increase, because that's really when we see gains. A kid making typical growth is going to do great, but if they're already behind, it's hard to match with their peers. And so one of the things we're trying to do to improve that is really using our common planning time to look at data. And the eventual goal is to really have formative assessment cycles where we can pinpoint and really get real specific around the data so that we can continue to improve that stretch growth. And then the yellow highlighted as the percentage of kids who have improved placement since the beginning of the year. Then you have your students assessed based on the total students. So you can see, you know, for some, there are some kiddos who didn't get assessed throughout for whatever reason, but for the most part, we've caught most of them for this reading.
Are those that met this annual stretch included in the annual typical growth percentage? So that 18 is in that 48, or is that in addition to?
It's a good point.
I imagine it's in, but I don't know that.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Because you would have to meet your typical growth in order to also meet your stretch.
Right. It's just how you broke it out, but okay.
I asked Samantha today to print a couple things especially related to stretch and typical growth. So if you look at the back of this, there's some really strong research from Curriculum Associates.
That stretch growth is the way to go. Yeah.
Speaks to this. So if you look at the very, very back page in that packet, that's going to do is it's going to show, sorry, and here's one for space. It will show how the student, if you look at grade 2, for instance, on the far left, and this is the student has met their stretch growth 2 years in a row. They are reaching grade level in reading, 83% of them, as opposed to a student who reaches typical growth 2 years in a row, 7%.
Isn't by definition, doesn't that make perfect sense though?
Not necessarily.
Because if they're 2 grade levels behind, they would have to stretch twice to catch up.
Yep.
If you only get typical, if you get typical, you're only gaining a year.
Right, but this is across all types.
I understand, but I just think it's inherent.
Well,
Am I saying that right, Heather?
the kids in here are not just the kids who are below. They're also kids who score mid or above.
No, at the bottom, it says all students began year 1, 2 or more grade levels below.
Oh, you are correct.
That's part of the push is we are looking at percentages. We need more kids too.
I agree, yes.
And that the research.
Because the only way you get,
If you do it. So
well, that's by definition.
Right, but if you look at 2 or more grade levels below, right now we're at 15% of that 161. So by definition, then we're looking at repeating similar results as to what we saw last year, the year before, if we don't start making a concerted effort
To get that
to
stretch.
do this. This is research-based and shows that if we do it, we close the gap rather than allowing the gap to continue to exist.
I think the other piece too is believing that it can happen.
Research shows us it can.
Yes, and I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah. No,
But that mindset.
Isn't the chicken or the egg thing? This is a result of the definition of stretch. That's it. So yes, you have to stretch 2 years in a row to gain 2 years. If you only grow, you're not gaining. You're still 2 years behind.
Typical growth.
If you get typical, you're 2 years behind still.
what I'm saying is we have a metric by which to progress monitor this starting in kindergarten. And if we're not leaning into it and actually letting it do what it should be doing and yielding the results it should be yielding for students, then we're going to sit again with 59 students in 4th grade who met expectations last year on MCAS. Like, we're not helping our own cause if we're not looking at the research behind the programs that have been purchased and making the push through goals, through professional development, that this is what we should be expecting.
So it's not enough to settle for typical.
No.
What I agree.
Here, and if you remember when we talked about it at BOY, for 65% of our students achieving typical growth.
Yeah.
We're setting ourselves up to be in a situation by which, bless you, to not get
Bless you.
Thank you.
more students across that finish line.
The idea of the metrics, though, I think we're to look at it over time because we had not reached 60% in terms of typical growth.
No, I agree, but I'm just
And so-
saying, like,
Yeah, and so we have to, I agree. One of the conscious choices was, as we set those goals, was if we keep putting it at 80 and everybody sees 80 when we've been somewhere in the 50%, 59%, as impossible. I agree with you. We have to make it tangible so that they can go after it and then keep discussing it and bringing the results into complimenting time. So we're all looking at it together.
and there has to be tight procedures around how we're making it attainable. What are we doing to ensure that small group instruction is happening? Kids are getting what they need in order to shrink the gaps.
And that's an interesting point, especially with reading. So one of the things with Wit and Wisdom is that the lessons are very long and it's new to teachers. So they have said, we really don't have a whole lot of time for small group instruction. So one of the things that's happening is that Wit and Wisdom has heard this feedback as well as a few other things that people have been saying. And they have created hour-long lessons. So we have 90-minute blocks for literacy. If we were to adopt that, we really would have no reason to not have that half-hour time for that skill work that kids need beyond the whole class instruction. Yes, you're going to differentiate. Yes, you're going to do accommodations, but the skills that kids particularly need, there isn't really time necessarily built into the schedule, especially when we're asking folks to use the curricular materials with fidelity. And then same thing with math. We're really pushing to get those illustrative math lessons within within 60 minutes so that we can have small group time. And at Meadowbrook, they don't have the luxury of that much time for math, but they do have something called flex boxes. And that's something that we can use. And I know the two coaches there have really been working on helping people set up their classes for that small group instruction. So all of this is an agreement, but that's the direction we're going in to address these needs. And the coaches working with Common Planning Time, part of that is also building the capacity to have these conversations around data to really pinpoint what kids are needing support in so that we can provide that support.
One of the things that you had asked us last year was projected proficiency. This one actually was in the original packet, which combines the grade levels, but we've also broken it out by grade level. And this is the point I think you're making. very similar percentages to what we saw last year at this time in terms of projected proficiency. The way the state breaks this out, and we had talked about, we were talking about competency determination, is you have exceeding expectations, which would be the blue, dark blue, I guess.
Mhm.
The light blue is meeting expectations, and iReady has it as proficient and not proficient. The state gives that, I guess that's a light.
Partially meeting the hot pink.
Partially meeting expectations, and somewhere in there is where the score for competency determination is determined, or had been determined. And then the dark red is your not meeting expectations. If you're using the state's
Front page of that that I had passed around has the scaled score context and there as well. Hard to look at this without that. Front
in
page.
terms of this. Yep.
That's the state language. Levels 3s and 4s on here, you're looking at meeting or exceeding expectations.
Right.
Now, whether you have the language to match up what we're saying students can do and are not yet showing us they can do. It's one thing to say, like, partially meet. Yes, I get kids can partially meet something, but partially meeting is not meeting grade level expectation.
So the goal being
That we'd like
to get all
Yes.
getting to meeting.
Yes.
meeting and expectations.
I think
Yes.
it's important to read the language to know that it's not just semantics. Like when we say a child partially met, like, you know, there's 56% of our third grade that's where they're projected to fall again this year. 56% of 189 students are projected to partially meet expectations.
Wait,
Real number.
what are you saying?
I'm looking at, sorry, you're
Looking at-
grade three. Yes. Look at 56.
Oh, yes.
11, if you combine those, 67%, 2/3 of our third grade right now are not projected to meet expectations on MCAS. Like 67% of 189.
And these are part of the conversations. So for example, Foundations has a lot of application for encoding writing, but not a whole lot of application for decoding. And so again, the coach at Meadowbrook is really working on that small group time to have time for that application. We've got decodables and really make sure kids are having time to apply. Because what we're finding is you might get kids at the third grade who are accurate, but they're not fluent. And that's going to obviously influence their ability to comprehend because they're spending all their cognitive energy on trying to figure out what the words are. So again, not negating what anyone's saying, just saying it is a work in progress as we're moving forward.
I don't take it in the way. I just think we as a committee need to be very clear about what these numbers mean. So to underscore it, that is 126 third graders who are projected not to meet expectations. 130 fourth graders who are projected to not meet expectations. And 111 fifth graders.
That's not what happened last year, though.
Yes, it is exactly what happened last year.
Yeah,
What they end up falling into is
I've got it on the,
Yep, but here, you can have that as well.
so it's actually uncanny how, I mean, it's not uncanny, obviously, it's based on statistics, but it can be very, it's, so, let's see.
So this is a chart that came in accountability data. And it breaks out by grade level how, what percentage the state had, what percentage we had in terms of exceeding, meeting, which Ms. Trulio was talking about. iReady has that indicative line. State talks about partially meeting expectations, and they have a gradual range, and then not meeting. In terms of the projected proficiency chart on iReady, which is this one, you have a clear delineation, which I think is what Ms. Trulio is talking about in terms of adding up the percentages.
Yep. Last year, 43% of kids met
Or
or
exceeded.
exceeded
Third
expectations.
grade in ELA.
Third through eighth. And this year we're projected 45%. So it has one of the tightest correlations possible. I mean, when you look at the research, it's 0.78, 0.8 in terms of
Right.
predictability.
So if we match up with the state though, aren't we,
I'm not saying we're matching up with the state. I'm saying the results at mid-year
yep,
are saying we're going to produce the same results for students this coming year as we produced for them last year, which is 45%.
And
Making sure our educators understand that how closely correlated, highly correlated this information is. And that's something we started last year and need to continue doing this year so that they know that this report actually reflects what the state gave us in accountability. It more closely probably, we gave an end of the year projected proficiency, and I think we're on within 2 percentage points in each category.
but the other thing we need to provide is the time and the skills to really dig deep and do that. And I have to say, with the way we've have this new curriculum, which is whole class, there really has not been a lot of time for that dig deep and address those skills within the classroom. But that's what has to happen in order for that stretch growth to happen.
I just wonder how relative it is, because if we're close to what the state is doing or better in many of those categories, then is it the measure that's off and not us?
I mean, it's an interesting question. It's certainly, we want to shoot, to Mrs. Trulio's point, to continue to move students into meeting expectations or exceeding expectations.
Yeah.
But it is also interesting in the same results from iReady, you know, as you look at how we're doing against the national norm, we did a little bit better in reading in terms of being in that upper right quadrant. And here we are in math, not doing as well, but still in the high performance, high growth area against national norms, right? All the people who take this test. So it's both. You know, you want to look at the urgency. I don't disagree with that. Absolutely, we need to see. We also want to celebrate some of the things that we've been able to do because we've not always had these graphs. We've always been in the upper right quadrant. So it's a combination.
Well, again, better to be high performance than high growth. We're already at high performance. There's lower growth though, right? But there's lower potential for growth. So we're much better off in this with higher performance.
I would
And
argue that is not the case. Quadrant 4, which is high performance, high growth, is where you would want to be.
you can't be there every year though. How can you do that? Because in order to get high growth, you have to have some you have some room.
We have plenty.
So if you get growth every year, I know, I got what you're saying. I'm not
We're not at high performance
But
yet.
I'm just saying, like,
But we're on the high performance side. We're in the,
Yeah, no, we're moving into that quadrant.
but again,
You do a both and here, like we're, you
Yeah.
know, people are really working hard. We're putting things in place. We compare well and we continue to strive to be excellent,
agree.
you know, because our kids can do it. And but it's really not like one factor. There's lots of factors that still need to be put into place, I think, to keep pushing that.
And I think the more we are talking about these results, so they're understanding that these projections are highly correlated to where they're going to be, that hopefully then motivates change as well, as we're giving different ways of looking at this and different ways to instruct. The motivation should come on this side in terms of creating a sense of urgency. Map down that you saw in English, where it gives you an idea of where they are in meeting the typical growth, meeting stretch growth. Also, how many students, what percentage of students improved the placement, and then in terms of total student success.
So, and the typical growth, don't meet the metrics at this point in the year, and the stretch growth we're not there yet. It is good to see with the students with improved placement though. I mean, that 2 or 3 grade levels below 72%. Same thing that we need to do for ELA is really pinpoint what kids are falling behind in terms of math and working in those small skill groups.
And the same studies in that packet that speaks to the same results being yielded from mathematics when kids meet stretch growth.
The thing is, like, we can work in the infrastructure, you know, and that's something we're looking for. One of the biggest pluses for that arts and letters is it's still a high quality instruction material. It's still very rigorous, but we have a short school day. So we can only do that whole class instruction for 60 minutes. We do need that time for small group, and they don't currently have that right now. So,
This is the same too. This is about math.
Thank you. So this is, what was originally in the slide deck as the combined. It gives you an idea of that same projected proficiency that we're talking about in terms of math. And then broke it out by grade level. And so it gives you an idea as to where right now, if the mid-year, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5 are in terms of exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, partially meeting, and not meeting.
and there's again, the same correlation with what they did on the MCAS. The only difference being that the MCAS measures writing, iReady doesn't. And so that can skew it. Same with the iReady doesn't necessarily have kids explain their answers and things like that, which they are expected to do in MCAS. So the MCAS expectations are even higher than iReady is what I'm saying. So, and sometimes our MCAS results did go above what the projected proficiency was. But
Everything we looked at last year was with less than 5%.
yeah, no, but
Quite a
for
few
the most part, it's predictive.
percentage points that were on the plus side.
Yes.
Not many.
Not many.
Few.
But again, I think we have to do a better job of looking at numbers. Like we have to acknowledge that last year, 662 students did not meet expectations. That's alarming to me. Like when you think about 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. That's 100 kids per grade level not meeting expectations.
It's alarming to me too, but I think you also have to take into consideration the other side of it. Like education's a business. There's a lot of money in this. I mean, like you were kind of getting a little philosophical there, like expectations from what? From this company, from the MCAS? I mean, there's a lot of subjectivity into it. And I also think we're missing a huge piece of the conversation, which is we're still in an aftermath of COVID. There's still, I mean, I understand that we're doing everything, from a curricular standpoint to continue to have our high standards, but I just think this is a small, obviously it's our job to drill into this, but like there's a bigger mosaic here that's at play as well, I think.
I don't know if you're a parent of one of those 662 kids that mosaic plays a role. Like that's hard.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all on this, but I think it's just a really complex, obviously, thing that we're looking at here.
I think again, it's that both and recognize that
Yes.
we're still post-COVID. Kids are coming really not able to self-regulate, which is why we really pushed the regulated classroom, which is all about we can't help kids self-regulate if we can't self-regulate ourselves because adults are struggling with this too. Gordon and I were just at a workshop about this and all of the things. And we can continue to strive for excellence because we don't want to be leaving kids behind.
Of course we don't.
Right. So and I'm agreeing.
Definitely have to
Yes.
continue the sense of urgency. When we're looking at districts that DESE compares us to, we're not dissimilar in terms of they have similar percentages. That's not in any way saying we shouldn't feel the urgency, nor should we be not communicating the urgency. I think we should. As we look at how we're doing in terms of the results, though, it's also good to see are we matching up with similar districts, at least in terms of our efforts, or are we exceeding that? And that's some of the information that we provided, I think, at the end of last year and also at the beginning of this year in terms of how DESE compares us with other communities. On this, you just see the state, but in those DART charts, you actually see sort of how these other districts,
With similar demographics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
meeting
Demographics.
expectations, exceeding expectations. I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just saying that, you
Yeah.
can actually see how it matches up.
The demographics of whom? Does it take into account the teacher staff? Like I know like on DART, is it looking at number of years of experience of the students?
I don't know if they do that.
Nation.
Generally look at, you
Looks
look
at
at your percentages,
graphics.
students, correct.
We also have to look at our teaching force.
Mhm.
Our teaching force is very seasoned what's the percentage, Pam, if you know, like, isn't it like 2/3 are at
70% is at the top
is at
step.
the top step. So we aren't necessarily facing the same factors that other districts are in terms of not staffed, younger into the profession is not necessarily a battle that we're facing. We have a seasoned staff who has been given high quality instructional materials to use. And we have a group of students who are poised and ready to learn. So I'm only saying that to underscore the fact that we were sitting here looking at very similar results at this point last year. The year before, we were sitting here looking at very similar results. We as a body are accountable to students. Point blank, period. That is it. When you look at the MASC, I even printed that today. The school committee must be responsive to its constituencies and governance, sensitive to the diverse needs of all learners, and advocate for students in learning before the people of the community. And as such, a vigorous ambassador for public education before all citizens. This is what we are accountable to as a board. And if we don't start to think about it differently and do things differently, then we can't expect different results. Like, this is who we are accountable to. And like I said, we're not hitting 50% of our kids meeting expectations. We have to do something differently. We have to. Like, it's not okay because it just becomes next year's issue. And then the year after that's issue. And then we're looking at competency determinations that now we don't have that common standard at 10th grade.
But I would argue, and again, I'm not trying to come across as defensive, we are taking those steps to put things in place. We got a lot of grant money to get high quality instructional materials, using that professional development, like the high school English team has been meeting. ESSER money funded, basically a coach to work with them, really mobilizing the coaches where we have them to build capacity of teams. And like I said, there are a couple pieces missing that are, things that we have to fix in terms of an infrastructure. But I don't think that we're looking at this and saying what we're doing is working. I think we know that we have to keep
Continue to-
working at, you know what I
Why
mean?
we looked at last year during negotiations, redesigning planning time and how we focused on certain things.
Yeah, I just think it's imperative to recognize, like, when we're working on things, kids get one shot at each grade level.
Mhm.
And we need to have that urgency every time we enter the classroom.
And I can you move on to the other ones? I just want to say, like, if you go, like, I know that it doesn't necessarily feel like it's connected directly, but yeah, we were just, again, at a workshop, where it's like the statistics around, the research around, if kids don't feel like they belong in a classroom, they literally cannot learn. Like, their amygdala is hijacked and their hippocampus can't do its job. And so, that is another piece, like I said, with the regulated classroom and working on all these pieces are all designed to try to create these spaces where all kids can learn. And I think part of it we talked about earlier too is that mind shift that all kids can, especially with our special ed population, really believing that, we have tools to help remove barriers from the curriculum. If we're using those tools and really doing the accommodations we need to, that population of kids should also be excelling, right? So I just wanted to point out too that there's other factors involved, including, some mindset shifts.
Was regulated classroom mandatory for all educators to take?
So yes, we did train the trainer, and then on our PD days, we had,
Attendance is an issue at.
yeah, for the PD days in the morning, the schools had trainings. And then Meadowbrook has taken it even further using their faculty meetings and things like that. So they have really taken that. And, you know, it helps with self-regulation, it helps with belonging, it helps with management because
It also helps with engagement because when you're,
you can't teach if they're not,
right, if you're
they can't learn.
monitoring and figuring out not only where you are as the instructor in the room, but also where your students are so that you can adjust to make sure that people are feeling comfortable, can engage them. One thing that the significant rise here in engagement, that's because of the change we talked about in terms of students not seeing sometimes as negative, but seeing it as a positive. So that's a blip that is not one where like, whoa, we changed something that was incredible, but we did have extensive conversations, actually one as recently as last week with high school students around, you know, how they were seeing when you're asked, how often are you interested in what you're learning in your classes? They see sometimes as a positive as opposed to a negative where it was weighted as a negative in previous surveys. But I think this is all part of what needs to go into any classroom. You have to obviously make sure you're setting the climate and making sure you're attentive to making sure that all students are feeling welcome and ready to learn. I mean, that goes back, no matter what we call it, it goes back to Maslow in terms of just breaking down basic needs.
So I think in addition to the difference, that these are all the shifts that teachers have to make. I think their classroom management needs to change because kids are different now in general, right? And so what we always did doesn't necessarily work. Instructional shifts, even principals are making instructional shifts with the learning walks that we do. We sit down and look at data together. We look at different things. They're learning these shifts too. So I mean, I'm not trying to make excuses as much as we are still in a learning curve in so many different ways, trying to balance all of these things. But I don't disagree.
I think the point that you're making is that we're bringing this information because it needs to be brought into these conversations, not only into leadership team meetings, but then once we've broken it down, we bring it into those smaller meetings with teachers, whether it be planning or setting us up for a learning walk.
Set the goals, right? That SMART goal drives the individual goals. Same page.
One of the things that we looked at as we looked at the winter climate and wellness survey was breaking it down into the different subgroups. And as you look at, look orange to me, but I guess it's red.
No, I was thinking it was orange.
When you get further into the darker orange, then that's a subgroup that's getting further away from the average. And so that's an area where we need to look at, you know, whether it be experiencing challenging feelings or engagement, as we've been talking about, or experiencing positive feelings, school safety. Those are all things that if we're not seeing more of the green, then we're not able to take the steps where we can actually get them to engage and learn to the level that they're capable of learning. You know, just going back to Maslow. And we're seeing this not only in 6 to 12, and we need to start to dig into this, but even though we're seeing decent numbers overall, say on the 3 through 5 survey, we're also seeing it in the 3 through 5, not as much orange, 6 through 12, but some. And so we need to break that down and look at that and have those same conversations, not just at the leadership team level, but breaking it down with staff.
Yeah.
And staff that have seen this have it.
Right.
It definitely.
They actually have access to this because all staff has access to Panorama, so they can get into this. I don't know if they're not having a facilitated conversation that they break it down to this level, but they can if they wanted to look at their class and see how past surveys went. Because all of this is in Panorama. But I think to the point that you've made a few times, we need to continue to have the conversations and create that urgency while putting all the support around not only staff, but also students.
And we as a committee need to think about the things that we do have the locus of control over and make decisions to support with the data changing. Like I know you said it half jokingly, but like we have a very short school day. We have a
Yeah.
very short school day,
I wasn't joking.
but we have an extremely short school day. And
It's hard to fit it all in.
extremely hard. And we've talked about this. We still don't teach all of the Massachusetts frameworks. We don't teach all of the state frameworks that we are accountable to because we don't have the minutes in the day to do it. So we
The
need to
majority of
really
the
think
time
about
is
that.
focused on literacy and
Math.
Yeah.
Those are what our
self-studies and science.
They're
Science
taught.
is picked up and taught.
It's prioritized.
They don't.
I'm talking about digital literacy.
That is not as
Science standards exist. We have health standards that exist. We have a wide variety of standards that move beyond that scope. We're not addressing because we don't have the minutes. I'm just,
Yeah, and you're right. And we pick them up, whether it be through the enrichment program or through PE or through counselors coming in terms of health standards and digital literacy with some of the enrichment work that we do is picked up there. But it's always a challenge
Yeah.
because how are you going to get to that when it's pretty much scheduled out first on literacy and then into math?
And with the schedule and the way it is, some teachers feeling like they don't even have enough time for math because it's, in the afternoon and it's this, transition time and this transition time and it boils down and they have a half hour for math, right? So how do we look at the infrastructure so that we can prioritize that too?
and then again, how do we as a board look at things that we do have control over, like the budget? What are we choosing to keep from curriculum? Are we helping folks to narrow the scopes? They can go deeper. We have control over the calendar and how many instructional minutes students receive on an annual basis. We do have things that we can put in place structurally to help support the data to shift. And I think we have to think about that when we're making decisions that have impact or that have the potential to impact students in a positive way. I printed the other stuff. I'll leave it in your mailboxes around academic learning time and the requirements by the state. I asked Gordon also for all of the schedules for the buildings because things like field trips, things like delays, all of that erodes instructional minutes, coupled with 3 lost days for half days. We have 6 half days. That's 3 days that are not full instructional days that therefore create a situation where we're losing 3 days of instructional minutes that eat away. We have to think about it differently or else we're going to keep seeing the same results on behalf of the students of East Long Meadow.
Our winter status report at the moment.
So are the schools coming next week?
Schools are coming at the next meeting. And so they'll give me a more specific look at what they're doing at that school for those grade spans. Tried to give you more of a district look and then leadership meeting on Thursday, so we'll be discussing what we're discussing here and how we proceed to relate that.
And will their slides mimic what we saw today? Focus on data around attendance, data around iReady
We
or
developed it.
Excel. Okay.
Yeah.
And less about panorama survey is one thing, it's a data point, but I think we've been talking about how we know what we are good at in terms of
Right.
supporting the whole child.
But I think it's still connected.
It's
I mean,
connected.
If you have the orange, as we saw in those.
Oh, I'm not saying not to put the
Um,
panorama
We
data.
certainly have to do a better job making sure that all our students are
Yep.
feeling like they belong. Because that's connected to how they perform. That's the template is.
Greg, it looks like Manny took you up.
Did, yeah, he waved goodbye. Okay, great discussion. We will continue it in 2 weeks. And final item for business tonight, fiscal year 26 budget development discussion.
Okay, that's me to start off. So after updating all your contractual obligations for FY '26, as well as increasing the special education budget lines that we've been discussing, a level services budget is an increase of approximately $3 million or 8.57% increase. Just as a reminder, the past 3 years, the school department has requested on average a 3.9% increase for level services. Therefore, we will need to strategize on how we can reduce the budget request. So, I've listed, similar to how I do on the quarterly reports to you, the different line items here. Just as a general reminder, 83% of our current budget is salaries and 17% is on the expense side. When I say 83%, we have 260 approximately, I could be off one or two, 260 employees on Unit A. That's $21.6 million currently. We have 18 custodians, that's another million. We have 18 secretaries, that's another million, 2.4 million in paraprofessionals, which we have 105, 15 administrators. I believe that's 1.8 million. My point is, it adds up very quickly, and I am very confident with what I bring forward to you. And unfortunately, I wish that number were lower, but it's not. It is $3 million that we need in order to keep, everything as is, which we know we can't do. So we will strategize and bring a plan again forward at the next meeting so we can maybe talk further about that and make some decisions and have the school committee vote on. Because obviously, for anybody out there listening, we know that this is not a reasonable budget to bring forward. The town cannot afford that. We understand that, so we would never bring this forward to the town council. So that's where we're at. I don't know if anyone has specific questions or, I guess I would just like to say, I know when you were talking about all the different, scores throughout the state, the budget is the same. Not every district is like us, but a lot of districts are struggling just as we are. I'm hearing more and more from other people and articles that I'm reading, and I don't want to mention any certain names. I wouldn't want them mentioning me, us. So, a lot of things are up between the contractual salary increases, special ed, out of district tuitions. I've shown you what they are, the contracted services, transportation that goes along with that. You put all of this together on top of inflation, and then all that ESSER funding gone. It's just a perfect storm. And I do think that we're better off than some districts, but we're not alone. So that's where we're at.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
The second page gives you that continued breakdown of how chapter 70 and local contribution goes down. And unfortunately, you can see over the last 3 years, chapter 70 has gone down in percentage in terms of their increases.
That's due, I believe, to the Student Opportunity Act, because they're trying to flip that, and towns, the municipal side, they're trying to increase them, but then they have their challenges as well. So, yeah, thank you for.
Any funds from the Student Opportunity Act?
Well,
You did see a big
a
adjustment.
very big adjustment in FY '24 that they gave the $1 million increase.
The last 2 years, we've, at least with this year's draft of the governor's budget, it looks like we're getting the minimum per pupil.
Okay, I guess that's what I'm asking.
Which has been it was $30. Last year, they increased the minimum aid to $60, and now the governor has increased it to $75. So, that could be increased. There's certainly, I'm sure that they're getting a lot of pressure from a lot of places that schools need more funding. But then again, everybody's got their challenges, and I don't know how much money the state has either. So there's too many moving pieces still behind the scenes, even, for us as well as the town. So although we have started many conversations with them and we're really pleased with them, and they've been some very good discussions, nobody really knows that number yet. So they're not gonna be able to tell us what they can, afford, and we don't, we're still gonna get that number down. So. Thank you.
Good plan.
Hey,
Anything else?
I don't think so.
Happy?
A lot of good discussion for today.
Yes. Not good. 2.5 hours later.
Yeah.
Hey, if nothing else, I would take entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
Still moved.
Motion made by Antonella. Second by Amy. Discussion, all in favor.
Discussion. 2.5 hours well spent looking at data. I don't think that's something that's flipped.
It's what?
Flip. I don't think that's something to take light. We spent 2.5 hours looking at the status of our students. And I think that that's important, as well as determining how we're going to move forward with the competence determination for the graduating classes of 25 and 26.
Other discussion. Favor say aye.
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 Nay, motion carries 5-0. Thank you. We are adjourned.